Three, two, one, and we are rocking and rolling. Yes. Welcome back to the channel. Today I am joined by a man who has tapped into levels of determination and resilience not experienced by many of us mere mortals. In the 205 years since the invention of the bicycle, no human being has cycled a further distance in 1 week than Josh Quigley. He cycled 2,179 miles. That's an average of 311 miles a day in a single week. So, yeah, only a very small percentage of human beings choose to experience mental and physical suffering on a level this extreme. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him today. Josh Quigley, welcome to the Seb Whitehouse Show, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. That was a pretty epic introduction. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty cool.
It is cool. It is cool. I love cycling myself, and to think that since the bicycle was invented, there is no one that has cycled further in a week than yourself. How does that feel?
Yeah, no, it is. It is a pretty cool thing, and just yeah, I don't even know how to kind of get my head around that. It's quite funny actually because later on today, I'm actually having a Zoom call with a cyclist called Joe Barr. Joe's a ultra endurance cyclist from Ireland, and he's actually going to be attempting my record in a few weeks' time. And I'm basically just having a Zoom call with him to basically just share all the things that we learn, give him some tips, give him some advice. And a lot of people kind of get surprised when I tell them that I'm doing that. So like, why would you want to help the guy that's going to take the record that you've got? And I don't see it like that. The way I see it is that, there's very few human beings in the world that would even want to ride 2,000 miles in a week. Never mind actually have the courage to go ahead and actually do it and make that commitment. So it's a very small club of people that have done that. So when you get a chance to have an opportunity to chat with somebody like that, I'm all for it. And I think that, if Joe goes out and breaks the record that we got last year, he's now in a club alongside myself and a couple others who know what it's like to cycle more than 2,000 miles in a week. And that's like, out of all the humans that have ever existed throughout, billions of years and stuff like that, like it's a cool club. So yeah, no, it's really amazing. And I think this is the sort of stuff that really kind of brings me alive and gets me excited. Like I like to do things like that, I like to do things that have never been done before. I like to really push the limits of human endurance. And I don't even like using that word limit actually, because I don't really believe in limits actually. I just want to push my body and see what it's actually capable of. And yeah, no, it's pretty amazing, mate. It really is.
Yeah, I really like your attitude in regards to giving him little tips and helping him chase the record, because I think that your perspective is pretty bang on with that. Like, there's only a very small number of, like, how many other people in the world would you be able to have this conversation with? A very small handful that you're even able to share, to give that advice to. So even that has got to be satisfying in itself. It's not like, it's not simple stuff. So it must be quite cool to just have that connection with him. And I think that, you know, as long as you're not sneaking him in dud tips, you're definitely doing the right thing. Is there like, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to touch on something else quickly. You said like out of all the humans to have ever existed, do you think part of the reason that actually when you put your mind to it, that we can do so much with our bodies is because like thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, we were like hunter gatherers and we had to travel and move much more. And your average human, like I say, 10, 20,000 years ago would have been able to cover vast distances every day. And we've just kind of forgotten those limits of our physicality in this day and age, perhaps.
Yeah, no, it definitely is interesting. I think when you mentioned that there, the first thing that I thought of was the book *Sapiens*. Have you read
Yeah.
*Sapiens*? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
remember reading that a few years ago, and a lot of that kind of inspired and influenced a lot of the ways that I kind of try and live my life. I try to essentially, and this is really interesting talking about this, 'cause I never really talk about this with anybody, but I always almost trying to kind of live my life as much as possible like one of those guys that lived like 10,000 years ago. Because I think, that's like for 95% or something like that of human history, that's how we lived. So we still kind of got that within us, but yet we live these lives now. We spend so much time indoors. We eat all the wrong types of foods. We're on screens and technology. And I think that's one of the reasons why, so many people are, mental health problems and things like that. It's one of the contributing factors. So I always like to try and kind of take it back to basics and try and almost live like those guys in a way. So yeah, no, that definitely influences a lot of my kind of like my lifestyle choices, like, you know, especially with food and nutrition and stuff like that.
So much of the things that make people feel more grounded and whole and motivated and alive these days are kind of back to basics things, like you just said, connecting with nature more and striving in the face of a challenge. I spoke to Pip Stewart a couple of weeks ago, who's a lady that did a world first expedition down the Essequibo River in the Amazon. And she was one of the first, her and two other women were the first people to travel from source to sea. Or they kayaked down this river for 3 months, basically. And I was saying to her that I think probably life used to be so much more difficult that like humans 10, 20, 30,000 years ago had more experience dealing with hardship. And in this day and age, we don't have that same experience dealing with hardship. And I think that's an essential part of the human experience. We've got all of our needs met. We've got food and shelter and warmth. But in actuality, like suffering in the face of a goal that we're striving for is probably a really essential part of like having meaning as a human being.
Yeah, no, it's been big for me, especially in the last few years, because, you know, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but like I essentially went from being a guy that when I was younger, you know, like the entire purpose of my life was to live for the weekend, basically. That was just like what I was really into when I was younger. I just used to love going out and drinking and going to the pub and, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I kind of had a bit of a, you know, a moment in my life where I thought I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something different. And, you know, following on for that, it was kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, what am I going to do in my life? You know, when you stop drinking, you get all this time back. You know, you get your weekends back, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know, like waking up. I'm so used to it now because I'm almost 4 years without alcohol. But like, see, waking up on a Sunday without a hangover, it's like, well, what am I going to do today? Like, you got all this time. So it definitely kind of forced me to ask some bigger questions around kind of purpose and meaning and what do I want to do in my life. And I think that's ultimately what cycling gives me. You know, it gives me so many different things, but one of the things that it gives me is it gives me like purpose and meaning. And I am the sort of guy that has big goals and big dreams, and I'm always chasing these big things. But to me, it's not so much about the moment of getting them. Like, you know, when I think back of last year of getting that Guinness World Record, which you can see behind me there, like the absolute best moment of that and my best memories of getting that aren't actually the ceremony with the official from Guinness World Records when he hands me that certificate. Like when he handed me that, it was an amazing moment. It was. But I basically just literally finished a few hours ago riding 2,000 miles in a week, pretty much. And you know, I was so tired and exhausted. But like that single moment wasn't the best moment. When I think back in my memories of that week, it was like, to be honest, it was the people. It's the people that I remember. It was the people on my team that supported me. It was the fans. It was the supporters that came out on the streets to wave and clap and cheer me like all day, every day for a week. That's the thing that I think about. It was the journey of getting that. It was, you know, it was the pain of having a first attempt 6 months previous that failed. It was, you know, the pain of the training, and, you know, it was the journey of getting to that moment. And so I love pushing, I love chasing, and I love striving to achieve things, but I don't get so caught up in, you know, actually getting that thing. It's just, to me, it's a journey and the process. That's what I love. Like, see, when I'm working towards getting the world record last year, like, see, I love the training, I love the nutrition, I love the Skype calls and the Zoom calls with my team, and we were talking about the strategies and the nutrition and the equipment and the tech. Like that, to me, like that's where the happiness comes from. And I think when you can get to that place where you've got kind of like this, you've got this duality of, you know, like chasing these big goals and dreams, which are so obvious, but also loving the kind of climb and the journey of getting there. It's a really cool place to be.
Yeah, that is a cool place to be. I can really resonate with what you're saying. And an interesting perspective on that is that the natural conclusion of appreciating the small things and appreciating the journeys for some people means not having big goals because they're just content in the present. So there's another interesting element to that, that you chase and chase and chase, and then you succeed and you reach these incredible achievements, and then it comes back full circle to the basics, and you realize you're just kind of content in yourself. And I think that's an experience that people have that you might have in 5 or 10 or 15 years once you've achieved all of your life goals.
Yeah, I've got a great story on that topic, actually. So I think it was maybe about 5 years ago at Christmas dinner. We're sitting there, me, my mum, my dad, my brother, and we were having a conversation about, me and my dad were having a conversation about what our goals were for the following year, 2018. And me and my dad were very similar in a lot of ways. We were the sort of we were sort of people that were very driven, very ambitious, always setting goals, very career focused and things like that. But my mum is the complete opposite of that. My mum is just a very sort of happy-go-lucky woman, just goes about her life, likes being in the garden, likes reading her book. That's how she's like. And I remember when we were having this conversation at Christmas dinner, my mum says to me and my dad, like, why do you want to set goals? And because I think I was asking her if she had any, I asked her for a joke, like if she had any goals, and she said, why would I want to set any goals? Like I'm just happy with my life and content. And I remember when she said that, it was like I was in two minds, because there was one part of me, it was like, oh my God, I can't imagine like living my life like that, because I'm the opposite of that. But there was also like another part of me, which was the more stronger feeling, which was I've just got so much respect for that, because that's who she is, and she's happy. I know that wouldn't make me happy. I'm not like that. But everybody's different. I think it just comes down to self-awareness and knowing who you are. Like I'm the sort of guy that literally from like 10 years old, I knew I was going to be somebody, and I knew I was going to make it at something in life. And I always wanted that. I always wanted to be rich, successful, famous. I always wanted it. And I just be honest about that. You can go deeper into that and psychoanalyze it. Why would a guy want all of that? Obviously there's things in my mind, insecurities and things like that as well that feed into that. But ultimately, it's who I am. I've always wanted to be somebody. I've always wanted to be on the biggest stage. I've always wanted to do big, amazing things with my life, and that's just me. It's just how I'm wired.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's I was watching a documentary with an Indian guru called Sri Prem Baba, and he was talking about the very natural human desire that a lot of people have to fulfill their ego. And he was talking about people wanting to see their name in bright lights, and he found it hilarious, the concept of anyone wanting to see their name in bright lights. He was laughing his head off, like ha ha ha, as if it was really silly. But then the interviewer sort of prompted him to say, "Is there anything wrong with that?" And he said that he thinks that fulfilling the ego and fulfilling dreams and succeeding at material ambitions is a really important part of a lot of people's journey, because you get a lot of celebrities, don't you, that say, "Oh, I wish everyone could get rich and famous so they could realize it's not the answer." But it's easy for them to say that because they've fulfilled that part of their life's desires, It's easy to say that once you've actually scratched that itch, but for a lot of people that itch needs to be scratched. And it's a good thing as well, because if humans didn't strive for something beyond themselves, then we probably wouldn't have airplanes in the sky, and we wouldn't be able to be having this conversation on the internet. This is all as a result of humans being obsessively fixated on external achievements.
Yeah, that's getting onto a really interesting topic, because this is something that I've contemplated so many times in my life. More when I was a little bit younger, not so much anymore. But I went down a real rabbit hole with spirituality, meditation. And in 2018, I went out to Nepal, Kathmandu. I spent a month in a Buddhist monastery, living with monks, meditating and all that. And basically, what I took from that is that that's an amazing way to live your life if you want to just be happy and just want to be at peace in your own mind. And I think you can take a lot of those principles and practices and apply them to the modern world and the Western world, essentially. But this is the kind of place that I came to. If you think about this whole thing about ego, right? If you look at like somebody like the Dalai Lama, for example, right? And then you look at somebody like Tony Robbins, right? You would look at the Dalai Lama and go, that guy has basically probably not got any ego at all. Like he's so humble, so kind, compassionate. He's just like not, we wouldn't say he's got a massive ego. You look at somebody like Tony Robbins and you say, Tony Robbins has got a big ego, which is fair enough. But then if you think about it, which of those two people have actually had more impact on the world and done more to help other people? And I would say that it's not even close. And that because Tony Robbins has got ego, he's got drive, he's got ambition, he's out there, he's writing all these books, he's doing seminars, he's doing coaching, he's literally helped transform millions of people's lives because he's got that ego. And that, so I don't think it's about a bad thing. What I kind of interpreted when I was in Nepal is that, I don't want to just spend my life in a monastery meditating all day, just being really happy. That's not enough for me. I want to have impact. I want to do things. I want to create things. And yeah, that's kind of my conclusions from that. Is I don't think there's anything wrong with ego as long as you're using it for good, it's a sense of self, it's a sense of identity, it's who you are. And it can become a negative force, and it can get out of control. But as long as you remain grounded and humble, I'm somebody that does have a big ego. Like, I really truly think I'm amazing. I believe in myself. I've got so much self-belief, but I'm also very kind. I'm very compassionate. Like, if you dealt with me in normal real life, away from social media and podcast interviews, like, I say please, I say thank you. I'm very kind, nice guy, and I'm very humble as well. But I do have that ego as well, but I don't see it as a bad thing anymore.
I completely agree. I don't think ego is a dirty word, because for many people, their spiritual journey involves satisfying their ego. Like Tony Robbins, for example, you gave a very good example. Some people aren't supposed to just sit around meditating and doing nothing, because that wouldn't be them, for want of a better term, vibrating at their highest frequency. It wouldn't be their perfect example of self-actualization. What you're doing now is you're in a process of self-actualization, of reaching your limits. So for you, that's what this looks like. And for your mum, for example, it looks like that. And for Tony Robbins, it looks like that. For some people, the best version of themselves is about giving out energy and achievements and external validation, recognition and reward from the world. And I think you touched on it perfectly at the end when you said, like, it can be a bad thing, because it really depends where it's coming from. Ego can be corruptive, or it can be empowering, and it's about, like you say, staying grounded, being humble, and channeling it for amazing things, like being the only human being to have cycled 2,179 miles in a week, bringing it back round to the cycling there. What do you think is the primary motivating factor behind you doing that? Is like, where do you think that comes from?
It's such a deep, layered, complex question. Like, at my absolute core, I just truly believe that this is what I was born to do, and this is what I was meant to do, and this is why I do it. That's kind of my first place that I go to. And this journey essentially started for me back in 2015. In 2015, broke up with my girlfriend, been together for like 7 or 8 years, really depressed for like 6 months at the start of 2015. The May of that year, I just had enough and decided I was going to end my life. Went out late at night, like 1 a.m, and basically crashed my car at 70 mile an hour on the motorway and tried to end my life. That's the lowest point I've ever been at in my life. And I was very lucky to survive that. When that happened, I was a guy that was, I was like 22 at the time, just going out every weekend, living for the weekend. That was my life essentially. And I just loved that. I loved doing that. And in that 6 month period in 2015, I would say that it went from being something that I used to do at the weekends for fun and like social life and love being with my mates, to something that was a wee bit more destructive. I was doing it a wee bit more, like sometimes on my own. I didn't used to do that. Sometimes I would just sit in my room myself, and it became more destructive as a way to deal with the depression that I was going through, and the breakup and all the things that had happened. When I crashed the car that night, although I did survive, part of me died that night. Like, I know it sounds maybe a bit cheesy and a bit cliche, but I had like a proper like spiritual awakening that night. Like, I have never been the same since that night. Like, that night, my life changed forever. When I woke up in the hospital the following day, from that moment on the 26th of May 2015 to this moment now, my life went a total different path. I'd never been religious. I'd never been spiritual. I was just drinking and living for the weekend. I was a complete opposite of somebody that had spiritual beliefs. But when I was in hospital, I was released to go like 24 hours after the crash. Literally came away for that crash with no physical injuries. And I walked along to the little hospital chapel, and I sat in there that night just kind of contemplating my life, contemplating what had happened. And I wrote a wee message in the book, which basically said, I don't know why I done this when I've got so many people that love me. I've never been spiritual, I've never been religious, but somebody somewhere looked down on me last night and saved my life. I've been given a second chance, and it's my job to go out there and do something about it. I basically thanked a God that I never even believed in at the time, which is like, to me, you want a definition of faith. thanking something you don't even believe in, that's faith. And so I had a proper awakening that night, and that set me off on a whole new path. And leaving hospital the following day, it wasn't like I just, literally just turned my life around instantly. I had a good 3, 4, 5, 6 months after that where I just kept drinking, kept going to the pub, kept living the life I'd been living. Because to be honest, I didn't know what else to do. I started drinking at 12 years old, started going to pubs when I was 16. That was my life, from in pubs and clubs from 16 to 22. That was all I knew. Like, I didn't know what else to do. Like, what else am I going to do? So I kept drinking, I kept going to the pub, but I wasn't the same person anymore. I can remember sitting in my local pub, a pub called the Saltire in Livingston, where I'm from. And that place was like my church at that time. Like, I loved it. Like, I was there like four nights a week. Favorite place in the world. Loved nothing more being in the pub with my mates, drinking. And I remember just being in there, and in that period, just like sitting drinking my usual pint of Stella. I remember one day like looking out the window, sitting drinking this pint, and I thought to myself, there must be more to life than this. Like, this isn't it. Like, this isn't why I'm here. And so I was determined to do something different, but I never knew what that thing was going to be. And then in November that year, I was running my own business at the time. I went along to a business networking event in Edinburgh. Sir Chris Hoy was there giving a talk about his achievements in the Olympics, or his whole story with cycling. And sitting in the audience that day as a guy that wasn't an athlete, wasn't a cyclist, didn't exercise, was overweight, had no interest in cycling, something within me was so inspired by Sir Chris Hoy. And I said, fuck it. I'm going to go and cycle. I'm going to go and cycle around the world. And that was literally it. I don't know if it was anything specifically about Sir Chris Hoy. I think it was more the fact that that thing was always in there. Like, I was always destined to go on that path. And he just kind of helped me see it that day. Like, something within me was awoken that day where I thought, that's what I need to do. I need to do something on a bike. And I'd always been the sort of guy that's always been so ambitious, so driven, a lot of self-belief, a lot of confidence. That's testament to the fact that I had my own business when I was 21. We had offices, we had staff. We had, I'd been awarded Young Entrepreneur of the Year by my local Chamber of Commerce. So, I was a sort of like a wee high flying sort of guy. That's what I was like. I was always like that when I was younger. I was always capable of achieving things. And so when I decided to get into cycling, naturally, I set myself the biggest possible goal that I could, which was to cycle around the world. Like, to a lot of people being in my position that day, they might have been inspired by Sir Chris Hoy and thought, do you know what? I'm going to go and buy a bike. I'm going to start cycling 2 mornings a week. Maybe I'll actually cycle like a coast to coast or a Land's End to John O'Groats if I'm really going to push the boat out there. I sat there in the audience that day and said, I'm going to cycle around the world. Like, that's fucking mental. It's like the biggest possible thing. Like, I didn't even know if I could cycle 10 miles or 50 miles. But the interesting thing about that is when I set myself that goal sitting in the audience that day, there was not one part of my mind that ever even questioned, can I do that? I just assumed I can cycle around the world. And that's just who I am. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer to the original question, but I'm just trying to kind of set the scene and give some context that the reason I got into cycling and the reason why I ended up, cycling around the world and breaking world records was because I sat in a hospital chapel, thanked a God I never believed in, and then went on the path. So I truly believe that this is always where I was supposed to be and always where I was supposed to end up.
So when you were sat there with Sir Chris Hoy speaking, had you ever like gone on any sort of long distance bike ride at all at that point? Did you have any cycling experience whatsoever?
No, I had no cycling experience. Like, I hadn't.
You might not have. How did you know you were going to like it?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I hadn't been on a bike since I was a kid. That was my reality at that time. But I think the place that I was in my life at that time, for one, I knew that I needed to do something different. I knew I needed a big change in my life. Like, I was suffocating in the environment that I was in Scotland. Grew up in a wee working class village in Scotland, just outside Edinburgh, a place called Livingston. Not to blame it in any way, but big drinking culture. That was just what the place was like a lot of Scotland and like a lot of the UK. And I knew I had to stop drinking. And all my mates that I grew up with, that's what we done. That was what we loved doing. We went to the pub, we went to clubs, we went on holidays, we went to Ibiza, we went to festivals, we went to Amsterdam, we went to Newcastle. That was our lives. And so I found it quite difficult to say to them, look, I need to stop drinking and I can't live this life. And so I do have regrets over that period in my life and the way that I handled that, because, there was a lot of people that I was close to, some amazing friends that I'll, still always be my friends to this day, even though we don't maybe see each other or speak that often, but that I grew up with. But I just had to go and do my own thing for a period of time, because it's really hard to be a young guy in Scotland who doesn't drink and go through that sobriety journey while still in that environment. Like I wasn't in a place where I could just keep going to the pub and just like not drink or have a cola. Like that was never going to happen. I had to get out of that situation. So cycling around the world, it almost was like the sort of perfect solution for where I was at that time in my life, because I needed something different. I needed a big change. And cycling around the world, it got me out of Scotland. Like it got me away. I got a chance to go away, a bit of time on my own, figure myself out, figure things out, and just kind of sort my head out. So yeah, it was always meant to be. It was meant to be.
I definitely feel you on it's difficult trying to change your life when you're in the same geographical location and surrounded by the same people. I think that's a struggle a lot of people have. They don't actually know who to communicate with, who to lean on, what connections to form with other people, and just what to do with themselves when they try and stop drinking. I've been through a very similar process as yourself, and I was a professional wrestler until I was 26, and when I quit wrestling, that's when I started cycling. And I always use the term that I say that I found salvation in the saddle, because I spent like 3 years just relentlessly cycling just to go from one period of my life to another. I literally cycled my way from ending my wrestling career into the stage of my life that I'm doing now. So, I mean, salvation in the saddle definitely seems like very relevant to your story as well. Quite literally, you found salvation in the saddle, starting in the chapel, moving on to the Sir Chris Hoy talk that you went to, and then the beginning of the journey you're on now. So, yeah, man, I'm happy that you've been through that process, and yeah, let's talk about cycling around the world.
Wait a minute. Sorry, wait a minute. Can you just tell me a little bit about being a professional? You can't just drop that in there. Like we need to talk about that. That's so fucking cool, man. Like I need to hear tell me a little bit about that. That's so cool.
All right. Yeah. So I was a pro wrestler. Like WWE, yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually got a lot of friends who I was wrestling with around the UK that are in WWE now, that have actually gone on to great things. A few guys that are like living the dream over in Florida, on TV every week on Raw and SmackDown. But yeah, man, I used to go up to Scotland wrestling quite a lot, Edinburgh and Glasgow, for a company called Insane Championship Wrestling. And yeah, there's quite a few Scottish wrestlers that I know quite well. And yeah, it is what it is, isn't it? It's you put on the spandex and put on a show, basically.
What was your finisher? Did you have like a finishing move like in WWE?
Yeah, man. I used to. So my wrestling name was Sebastian Radclaw, and I was this weird, like. I'll send you some videos later. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice now, but I'll send you some videos later. But do you know the wrestling move, the split leg moonsault? Do you know what that one is?
No.
You jump onto the top rope, and then you sit down almost on the top rope. You kind of jump, and then you sit down on the top rope with your legs apart. Okay. So underneath the bottom of your legs, they bounce off the top rope and propel you backwards into a backflip onto your opponent. That was my thing, man.
So how did that actually work? Because like I know like WWE and stuff like that is it's like entertainment. It's a lot of it's like staging and stuff like that. So how was it like that for you as well, or you were like trying to beat people like in the Olympics?
No. It was WWE. It was WWE style wrestling.
Right.
It was a performance. So yeah, man, I spent a lot of time in spandex before I started cycling. I spent about 10 years in spandex, but lycra spandex. But yeah, it's like a performance. So you have a conversation with the person you're working with beforehand, and you kind of have a rough outline of what you're going to do in the match. And you're both experienced, so you've been doing it for a number of years. So you can, with people that are really experienced, you can just say a few things that are going to happen, and then sort of ad-lib the rest when you're in there because you've done it 100 times before. With people that are much newer, you might have to be a bit more detailed about exactly what's going to happen, so they don't randomly like pick you up and drop you on your head. So yeah, it's just like anything else, really. The more experience you get with it, the better you are. But yeah, wrestling was my thing, and And I actually interviewed an old wrestling friend of mine on this channel last week. I put that video out last night. But when I stopped wrestling, yeah, cycling was the thing that just kept me sane, man. I did Land's End to John O'Groats. I did it over quite a long period of time. I had like wild camping
Yeah.
stuff with me. It was more like bike touring. But yeah, man, I love cycling, and I think it was around then that I discovered you and a load of other people on Instagram as well. And that's when I started following your journey.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
So these round the world attempts, because there was a few of them, wasn't there?
Yeah,
Do you want to give
yeah.
do you want to give like the brief overview of sort of like how many attempts there were and what went wrong each time, sort of thing, like a kind of brief like cliff notes.
Yeah. So I think there was technically like 8 attempts,
Wow.
but there really only was like, I would say there ever really like one proper attempt, and I'll kind of talk you through it. So the first attempt, I basically went away and I spent a year cycling around Europe. I'd done about 10,000 miles, 14 countries. And after doing that like my plan was to just keep going and, move through Europe and Asia, Australia, America, you'll go around the world. But, after doing that for a whole year, I just felt so good. Like I felt so happy. I got on that bike, not because I was a guy that grew up with a dream of cycling around the world. I got on that bike because I was a guy that had a dream, and that dream turned into a nightmare, and my life went off the rails, and I was trying to get it back on track. I got into cycling because I wanted to be happier. I was hoping that cycling around the world might, get my life back on track, essentially make me feel better. That was my reasons for doing it. So, a year into that, I've cycled around Europe. I've been on the bike, most days. I'm doing about 50 miles a day. I'm sleeping in the tent at night. I'm camping on the beach. I'm in the fjords in Norway, French Riviera. I'm being hosted by all these amazing families and, couch surfing and sites like that. People welcome me into their home. I'm staying in hostels. I'm meeting other, young travelers, people that are similar to me, a bit lost and trying to figure it out. I'm reading all these books. I'm meditating. I'm eating good. It was just the adventure of a lifetime. Have you ever just imagine like being in your early 20s and not really sure what to do with your life, and you get to go and travel around Europe on a bike for a year? It was just fucking unbelievable. And even with everything that I've done now in the bike, I think my most special memories are still that first year I went away, because it was just so different to anything I'd ever done. Like I'd been on holidays and stuff when I was younger. I'd been to Florida and New York and Spain and France, but I'd never traveled. I'd never like really traveled, if that makes sense. And
Being in the experience of freedom, isn't it? The freedom that you have.
Yeah.
Different from a holiday. When you're traveling, you have a sense of space and freedom, whereas on a holiday, you're usually in like one resort or one hotel and you kind of stay around there.
Yeah, like when I started that trip around the world, I was 23, I believe, or 22, and I'd spent 22 years living at home with my mom, with my dad, with my brother. Never moved out with uni. Never moved out when I had my girlfriend. 22 years living with 3 people, and then literally from the first day I left Scotland, for the first 7 weeks of the trip, I was hosted every single night by a different family through Scotland, England, France, Belgium, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. And it was like, you've just spent your whole life living at home. Then you've spent 7 weeks every single night in a different person's house, complete stranger. It's not like these were like family or friends or relatives or somebody that I knew. No connection at all. So it was proper in the deep end, but it was just one of the best experiences of my life. It was just, it was so amazing. And I think just that year really kind of gave me my zest for life again. It kind of got me happy again. My lifestyle was totally different. I wasn't drinking, I was eating well, I was on the bike almost every day. I turned my life around, and it's largely been down to, the lifestyle change, but also just like the experience of traveling around Europe. So I went home, quit my cycle. I don't need to do this anymore. I've kind of got my goal, which was happiness. Went back home, and it was originally pretty good at first, but I just started to struggle again because I just found it easy to kind of slip back into old habits when I was home. When I was home, I didn't cycle, started going to the pub again, started drinking again. And, very quickly I started to feel depressed and shitty again. So I had a period of about 18 months where I kind of just kept getting back on the bike and trying to go away and do it again, and kept coming home. And those kind of like the attempts number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were basically just like no real attempts. Like I'd go away and a couple of weeks and I'd come back home, and I'd go away for a week and I'd come back home. And I was mentally unstable at the time. Like I was basically just lost. Like that year on the bike changed me so much. I found it hard to go back to the real world. And I was just kind of a bit lost and just kind of always longing for the road and that lifestyle. Because I was on the bike, living in a tent, €5 a day was enough to survive. You go back home, you need to earn like what, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 a month just to survive, just to have, your own place and pay bills and food and all that. It was just a total different lifestyle. So I was always drawn back to the road. I eventually kind of left cycling behind and, managed to get quite settled in Scotland. I started doing a bit of public speaking. I was giving talks. I was speaking for companies and events and conferences. I was going into schools and colleges and universities. And I was basically just sharing the story from, everything that had happened up until that point, the depression, the suicide attempt, getting on the bike, cycling around Europe, kind of getting my life back, and then just sharing that to try and inspire people. And I genuinely thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And, I still do a lot of that now, even though I'm still cycling. But I thought I was just going to be a speaker and just go around my life just being a speaker forever. And I was probably going to write a book and stuff like that as well. But at the end of 2018, my dad, he passed away. He'd had quite an intense battle with leukemia that year. And I just found that pretty difficult. If you know what it's like, if you ever lost somebody, a parent or a loved one or sibling or whatever, it's a pretty tough thing to go through. And grief kind of hits you different to loads of other things. Grief's not just like being depressed for a bit or something going wrong in your life. Like, grief's like, it just hits you different. And I decided to get back on the bike once again after not cycling for 18 months. Had another couple of attempts around the world, came home, and I got to a point where I had a bit of a man in the mirror moment where I'd basically tried to cycle around the world 6 times, and 6 times I came home having not done it. And I knew that it was time to just commit to something. Like, I'd been all over the place in that 18-month period. I hadn't really committed to anything, and I needed to go and just do something now. One thing, pick it, commit to it, and that's it. And so there was only ever going to be one thing. I tried to go around the world 6 times. 6 times I came home, not done it. It was time to go and cycle around the world. And so I got back on the bike for a 7th attempt. And that was the moment that, there's a few big moments in my life, the breakup, suicide attempt, getting on the bike the first time, Sir Chris Hoy. But getting on the bike for that 7th attempt, from that moment to this moment, I never looked back, and I've been relentless and committed and dedicated to one thing, which is cycling. And committing to cycling around the world was the thing that truly changed my life, because when you just commit to one thing and you stop quitting, you stop starting and stopping all the time, what happens is you get good. Like, you get good. When I set off to Scotland in that 7th attempt, I never looked back. After about a month, I was in Istanbul, cycled across Europe. 3 or 4 months later, I was in Tokyo, sailed right across Asia, China, Japan, got across Australia, was about halfway across America. And just 8 months after leaving Scotland in the 7th attempt, I was just a few thousand miles away from finishing the round the world when I got hit by the car in Texas. And so I wasn't able to finish the trip at that time. I was just, I was literally a couple of weeks away from finishing it. I was going to finish by the end of that year. And then there was a whole thing with, COVID. By the time I'd recovered from that, we can go into America a wee bit deeper, but by the time I'd recovered from all that, it was COVID would start in. So I was stuck in Scotland for a year and a bit, 2 years basically. So that's why I started going and doing all the kind of the world records and stuff like that. But I eventually managed to go eventually managed to go back to America at the end of last year to finish that round the world. So that was technically my 8th attempt. But yeah, there was a lot of attempts. But I've now technically, I never done it all consecutively because of all the stop starts and getting hit by the car in Texas. But I have now technically, yes, I have cycled around the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an incredible achievement. And in total, you said it took you 8 months to get to Texas before you had that crash. Is that right?
Yeah,
8 months. That's pretty fast. That's good time, right?
Yeah,
That's
I
fast.
started off doing like just like 50, 60, 70 miles a day.
Yeah.
By then that I was doing like 200 miles a day. I was doing some
Yeah.
days that were 250, 270. So like that was really what happened on that seventh attempt was, you know, up until that point, I never really seen the cycling around the world as like a physical challenge. It was like a spiritual journey essentially. It was like it was never about the bike. It was like the spiritual, the inner, the emotional journey that I was on. The bike was just a vehicle for that. But that seventh attempt in 2019, when I really went for it, it transformed from a spiritual journey. Well, it was always going to be spiritual at its core, but it transformed from just the bike being a vehicle to becoming all about the bike. And that was really the year when I went from being a guy that was lost, unsure what to do with his life, pedaling around the world, looking for answers, to becoming the athlete that you see today that's, you know, got a Guinness World Record and, you know, is at a pretty high level. So I fell in love with cycling that year and discovered, you know, a passion and a talent for it through
That's
the
awesome.
process of committing to it.
And also perhaps the fact that you cycled yourself into that happy place, you cycled yourself into some position of spiritual meaning and purpose, gave you the space, you released all of that internal friction, all of that internal resistance that had been holding you back previously, and just gave you the space to develop that strong state of mind to go and do the things you're doing now, I guess.
Well, it's really interesting when you kind of look back on that, because there was always something that scared me about cycling around the world. There was always that's what basically stopped me all those earlier attempts. There was a fear, but it was never like the fear of like the practicalities of it. Like there was no part of me. It was like, oh, I'm scared to cycle through Kazakhstan on my own, or I'm scared to cycle across like China myself. It was never like I'm scared of being robbed or attacked, or like it was not. I never had any fear about that. I think it was that I always knew deep down what I was going to lead to, and I always knew that I was going to lead to this. And that's quite a scary thing. You know, the best way to communicate that point is that famous quote, which is, oh, I always forget it. Let me get it right. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. It is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And that was it. Like I knew how great I could become, and I knew the path ahead of me. And to be honest, that's a scary thing. Like it's a scary thing to go and become who you were meant to be. It's a lot easier to not be who you're meant to be and just go and be somebody else. You'll go and create a persona. Create a persona as this guy that loves drinking, loves going out, loves living for the weekend, loves being the life and soul of the party and when he's in the pub. That was who I thought I was when I was younger, and I created this whole persona around that. When I had the suicide attempt and that night, that guy died, and this is what was left.
I love that quote. That's one of my favorite quotes, and it's very resonant with me at the moment. Actually, I think I've had a lot of ups and downs, just like yourself. There's a lot of your story that I can relate to. The internal friction, the resistance, the starting something and stopping it, and having big goals, but kind of not quite working out how to make them happen. And yeah, man, like a lot of your story I can really relate to. And I think fear of success, fear of happiness, fear of vibrating at your highest frequency, fear of like walking into your life's purpose. I think that it's a deep, deep, deep fear, and I can really relate to what you're saying. You weren't scared of Kazakhstan. You were scared of becoming yourself, and it is terrifying. I can definitely relate to what you're saying, and I think you put that across really well just then.
Yeah, I think part of it as well is that it's kind of scary to go out into the world and pursue your goals and dreams in such a public way as well. Like I was documenting and sharing all this as it happens. Like I was literally there was one time, the best story that I've got from that period of my life was there was one of the times, I think it was like maybe the fifth or sixth attempt around the world. I cycled from Edinburgh down to Dover, and I had to get the boat from Dover across to Calais into France. And I got the boat across, and then once I got there, I was like, shit, I can't do this, man. This is too much. And I got the boat back, and I was just going to go home. And then I woke up. I stayed in Dover that night, and I was going to go home the next day. I woke up the next day and I was like, no, come on, Josh, you can do this. Like, we need to do this. Let's go and cycle around the world. I got the boat back to France again. And then once I got to France, I thought, no, I can't do this. And I got the boat back again. So like I just basically was just getting the boat back and forward between Dover and Calais, right? And just like, you just think it, when you think about that, like that's not just something that I was doing on my own. This was on social media as well. Like I've got a video of me standing on the beach in Dover saying like, Like, I'm really scared to get this boat. Like, I just don't know how to do it. Like, people were watching this live. People were commenting. People were, do you know, the interesting thing about that, see at that time, right? I had a lot of people that followed and supported me and have continued to follow and support me to this point now. But there was a lot of people back then, a lot of haters, a lot of critics, a lot of people that just kept saying to me, Josh, you know, you need to stop this. You're mentally unstable. You know, this is never going to bring you peace or happiness or fulfillment or whatever it is you're looking for. Stop trying to cycle around the world and go home. You know, get a real job. You know, settle down. You know, get a flat, girlfriend, whatever. Blah blah blah. And that was the kind of like the perception of a lot of people at me at that time, that that's what I needed to do. But I just knew deep down, deep within my heart and soul, that there was something out there for me, and I had to go and do it. And so I went and done it. And see, if I never done it, I would never have got that world record, and I never have became the athlete that I am today. And see now, there's almost nobody that attacks me now on social media or says anything about this isn't what I should be doing. There's people that will still attack me and criticize me. You know, that's par for the course in this game. But I don't think there's anybody that would try and say this isn't what I should be doing with my life. Like, I'm clearly got the talent for cycling, clearly good at it, clearly got the passion. This is clearly what I'm supposed to be doing. And my success and our success as a team, that what you achieved last year, that's testament to that. But you know, it's not easy doing things in a public setting and putting yourself out there.
What are your reflections on that? Because I went through a period when I was wrestling of putting up a lot of my life story in a public setting, and after I had a few of these ups and downs, because I actually had went through a very, very similar process with you when I was wrestling. I was doing well. Just as my career was breaking out, I quit wrestling, and then I came back. And then just as it started breaking out again, I quit wrestling. And after a while, you can kind of feel people's confidence and belief kind of dries up on you a little bit. And you start wondering whether you should be displaying so much of your journey publicly. Like, do you have any reflections on that? Do you regret making it all so public? Did you have a period of time where you were like, I need to stop posting and just start doing it and post about it afterwards? Or how do you feel about being so transparent with your journey?
No, it's an amazing question actually, because I love talking about this, because what I think is so interesting about that period is I was taking so much stick and so much. You know, it's the best thing to do actually. See if anybody listening to this, or even yourself, one day you're just sitting on the couch bored one night, go into my social media, right? Scroll back to April the 14th, 2019, and look at the video that I post when I said I'm getting back on the bike and I'm going to cycle around the world, and I was going to do Edinburgh to Istanbul. Go back and see that and read the comments, and then read the comments and then the post for the next couple of days. You know, the good thing about that is, right, I knew I was going to get attacked for that so much. I knew I was going to get criticized, because I was literally just like, this is what my life was like back then. I was coming out on social media saying, I'm going to cycle around the world, and then a week later I'd be home. I'm going to cycle around the world, I'd come home. Like, it was just so on and off, stop, start all the time. See that final time when I got back in the bike and I made that video and I posted it. Seeing all those comments came in that time of people that were attacking me. Do you know, there was not one party that bothered me, because I just knew. I knew this is it, and I'm going to do it this time. And so I knew it, and I always had the faith that it was going to work out. And so there was no part of me back then that thought, don't share this, just keep it to yourself, because I knew I could do it. I knew I would do it. And I knew that the time would come where I would cycle around the world and I would be proved right. And so I think when you've got that deep faith and that deep belief in yourself that you're going to do it, that's why you don't care so much. And so, no, I'm so glad I've done it. And I'm so glad that I've got all that documented from the early parts of the journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in fact, I'll be completely transparent at this point now and tell you that part of the reason I was enjoying speaking to you so much is because I have witnessed so much of that journey of yours. And there were probably points where I might have started to have doubts as well. So it's been a real pleasure to see your Guinness book, your Guinness World Record on the wall behind you, because now that is just testament to someone who has bounced back from failure, from setbacks again and again and again. And that's what it's all about. And I suppose a lot of the journey that you must be on must be kind of cultivating a loving relationship with the idea of setback and with the idea of failure. Like, what is your relationship with setbacks? Does self-doubt ever creep in? Do you feel sort of, does it knock you for a while, knock your ego, knock your confidence, and you have to build yourself back up? Like, how do you frame that part of your life?
So I think one of the, like, on this journey in the past couple of years, like, it's basically been about three years now since I committed to cycling, and I've just been like 100% committed to cycling, cycled around the world and done the records and the world records and stuff like that. And I'm now just about to start racing. In that period, there's been so many obstacles, so many setbacks. Originally when I was cycling around the world, I got ill, I got sick, I had a damaged passport, I got my bike stolen, got hit by a car in Texas. Then when I came home, there was loads of other setbacks as well. There's injuries, there are accidents, just so many things going wrong on a day-to-day basis. But I think one of the things that's always helped me is that I've always been quite good at business and marketing, and I understand narratives and how narratives work. And so for me, I've always thought of my life as like a book, because I've always knew I was going to write a book, and I've always knew there's going to be a book and a movie about my life. It's a cinematic life story. And so every time something goes wrong now, I basically just see it as another chapter of the book. And so the way I see it in my mind now, if there's only two things can happen. Things either go to plan or they don't. If they go to plan, brilliant, because that's what you're aiming for anyway. If they don't, it makes a better story. It's a better chapter in the book. And so that's what happened to me in 2021. I had my first attempt at that record in April, done the first 5 days, and had to pull out with a knee injury. It was really painful. It was really difficult at the time, but I managed to get back in the bike and go for it. And it was a much better achievement and a much better story because I had a failed attempt earlier in the year. There was a lot of pressure on me going for that. You think about the pressure I was under on that second attempt. Like, I literally had to pull out because of a knee injury, which is something that can, could have happened again quite easily, to go and put your body through that. And I got back on that bike. I felt the pressure and I loved it. Like, there was no part of me that seen that as a negative. Like, I loved the pressure. Like, I loved the fact that I needed to perform. I loved the fact there were so many people watching and following online. I'm a big game player. Like, I come alive in those moments. And I think that's always helped me deal with the setbacks, is that I see them as they're good chapters for a story in a book. And, and I think what I would add to that is it's not like, I don't have that awareness in every single moment as it happens. I have that eventually. Like, so when I had the knee injury and I had to pull out of the first attempt, I'm not sitting in the villa that night with a big smile on my face going, oh, this is a great story. This is a brilliant chapter of the book. I'm like as depressed as I've ever been in that moment. And I'm feeling so low and I'm so shit. And I eventually come through it. And then I'm like, right, that's fine. So I think in the short term, I wouldn't say I'm very good at dealing with setbacks in the short term, as and when they happen. But in the long term, I always manage to get on my feet again, and I come again and I go again. So I think that's probably how I deal with setbacks.
I think that's a really good way of framing it. I think you've got to live life like you're the character in your own movie, because in every movie, when the hero takes a knock, he's usually, when he hits rock bottom, he comes back up. And I think if you can view your life like that, then it gives you, it's the hero arc. It's an archetype. It's classic,
So I've kind of, as I mentioned, I've always lived my life like a book, in the sense of I'm always very aware of, like what stage of the book am I at, and, what's the next chapter. So see, any time in my life I've got a big decision to make, or I feel like I've got kind of like two paths that I could follow, I always kind of think about it in my mind, like, what's the next chapter of this book? And it kind of really did change my life thinking like that, because see, I had a period in April 2019. I'd had 6 failed attempts around the world. I was considering just, giving up cycling forever and just not doing it. And I was staying in a hostel in Edinburgh at the time. I was in that period of my life, I loved traveling. I liked staying in hostels. I liked meeting other travelers and things like that. And I was thinking about either getting back on the bike and going and cycling around the world and just finally doing it, or giving that up forever and just getting a job in the hostel and working that, thinking that's something that I might like to do. I remember sitting in the hostel reception that day, and I was sitting there and I was staring at the reception. I was looking at the desk, people working behind it, and I was trying to psych myself up to stand up and walk over and say to them, have you got any jobs? I'm looking for a job. And I remember sitting there in that moment, and I thought to myself, is that the final chapter of this book? like you go through all of that stuff, you go on that journey, you try and cycle around the world 6 times, and then you come home and you decide to quit, and then you get a job in a hostel, and that's your life. Like, that's not the final chapter of this book. And I thought, you need to go and cycle around the world. And the funny thing is that at that time, I thought that was the final chapter. I thought, I'm going to go and cycle around the world. I'll finish it, and then I'll write a book. And that was the book. I never realised that it was going to lead to me getting really into cycling and wanting to go and race and compete and break world records. Like, that was a bit that I never realised at the time. But my life would have been totally different if I never thought about it like that day.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. Yeah, which is a perfect transition now onto that Guinness World Record. We've got about 15, 20 minutes left, so let's get to this, because it is a very different type of cycling. The cycling when you're going around the world, even when you're doing like 150, 200 miles, it's different, isn't it? The type of cycling when you're trying to go for records, it's not so much about the landscape, the scenery, the exploring, the meeting people. It's suddenly all just about just getting your head down and battling those demons on the road. Like, I know this is going to sound like such a ridiculous question considering what we've been talking about for the last hour, but when you're cycling 311 miles a day, like, are you enjoying it?
It's a hard question to answer, honestly, because, see, what I want to say right now when you ask me that is I want to say yes, like, it was amazing, it was brilliant, but that's me looking back in it. That's me looking back in it as the guy with the world record with the rose tinted glasses, and I've always looked back at things in my life more favorably than they actually were at the time. At the time, it was just like mostly suffering and pain. And there was amazing moments throughout it, but like, literally, I think this tells you a lot about my psychology and people that do stuff like this anyway, is that literally the whole time I was doing it, all I was thinking about was it stopping and it being over. Like, that, like, on day one, it's like, right, let's get day one finished. Like, let's get 50 miles, 100, 200, 300. On day two, you're like, right, let's just get this day done. That you're constantly just trying to get through each day. You constantly just want it to be over. And then once it's over, I was like, fuck, that was amazing. Like, I loved that. It's so weird, man. It's so weird.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting now and you ask me about it, and I'm like, even if I was to look at like a video of me right now riding up and down that road that I was riding up and down all day, I'm like, oh, that was brilliant. But see, to be honest with you, it wasn't. At the time, like, it was suffering, it was pain. And there was amazing moments throughout it. Like, I would just have to give an amazing shout out to like the people that came out to follow and support me. Like, we done it in Aberdeenshire on D-side. The people in all those villages, you know, Drumock, Ballater, Bankery, Aboyne. That was basically, I was riding through those villages all day, every day. Those people came out in their hundreds and their thousands to support me, and that's my lasting memories of it. Like, there was always somebody to wave at. There was always somebody standing at the side of the road clapping. Like, I was so busy like engaging with the fans and supporters that if I was just doing it on my own, it would have been soul destroying. And it was hard and it was tough, but those people really got me through it. Like, they really, really did.
You mentioned you were going through these villages all day, every day. Like, how, I guess you were doing a circular route. How long was the route that you were doing? How many laps of it would you be doing each day?
Yeah, so the route was about 32 and a half miles.
Is that it? Wow. So you did that like 10 times a day?
So it was 32 and a half miles from the start out to Ballater. And then I went back. So that was like 65 miles. I tried to do that like about 4 or 5 times a day or something like that.
Right, okay. Was it
so
flat? Was it flat, hilly, bit of both? Or?
It was...
You want to keep it flat for this type of thing, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. It wasn't totally flat. It's relatively flat. It's not. There's no like major climbs, but there was still a good 8 or 9,000 feet of climbing each day because you're doing so many miles.
Right.
But no, it was in a lot of ways it was like the sort of perfect thing for me, because one of the thing that I used to hate when I was cycling around the world was that so much of my time was spent on all the stuff that I'm not good at and that I hate, like fixing the bike, fixing punctures, having to go to the bike shop, you know, the logistics, the finding food, all the stuff that you need to do. Whereas the great thing about the world record attempt was that I had such an amazing team of people around me. Like, I had a team of about 20 people, 10 of them like actually physical crew with me on the road, 10 of them behind the scenes on social, digital marketing and stuff like that. But the crew and my team that I had with me in the support van, they just allowed me to do the thing that I love most and that I'm best at, which is ride the bike. Like, I had one job in that team. Well, I had 2 jobs. One job, my main job was to just ride the bike. My secondary job was like waving at people and engaging with fans and supporters along the way. That kind of became like a second job. But no, I'm joking aside, like I just got to ride the bike and everything else was looked after. You know, that my breakfast was made for me in the morning, my drinks were handed to me on the bike, my food was given to me, I had a massage at night. Like I never had to do it. That whole week was like the most pampered week in my life. I never had to do I never had to lift a finger to do anything. And so that suits me because that's what I love. Like I used to just hate like cycling across America and I get stuck in the desert in Arizona because I've literally punctured 4 times that day and I've no tubes left. So it's like that time I got to focus on just performance, ride the bike, and the team looked after everything else. And it really was a team achievement. And you know, we all done that together.
Yeah, that's what you want, man. You want to be able to just focus on the thing that you need to do. And it's funny when you say that that was the most pampered week of your life, because despite the 311 miles of cycling a day, it must have been nice to have your food sorted, your social media sorted, massage in the evening. How many calories were you burning a day, and how the hell did you replace them?
It was an average of around about 10, 11,000 calories. I think the lightest day, the lowest day was about 9,000 and the biggest day was about 13, 14,000. I think it was an average kind of, but yeah, 10, 11, 12,000. And yeah, that was one of the main challenges that we faced. And there was kind of, I'd say, two main challenges we faced with the record. And they're both, I'd probably say, equally as hard. The first one was probably the lack of sleep. Like, I actually didn't find the record that hard. You know, I actually felt quite good on the bike physically, you know, power that I was producing. You know, you're just sitting at a low intensity for like 18, 20 hours a day. What was difficult was the sleep deprivation. Like I was getting to my bed at like 1:30, back up at 3:30 on the bike. Like you're lucky if you got 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And it wasn't quality sleep either. It's not like, you know, my head was just my head was racing. You know, my head hit the pillow. I'm just thinking about like that what we're doing basically. I was so focused and so driven in that week. So like you're not getting good sleep. So I just kept falling asleep on the bike. I kept having to stop for like 20-minute power naps. So that was a real challenge. The other biggest challenge was nutrition. Like it's just there's some people out there who love food that might say, no, that sounds amazing. I'd love to eat 12,000 calories a day. But no, it's see when you actually have to do it, you haven't eat like every 20 minutes, taking on fluids every hour, like it just your stomach just can't deal with it. Like my stomach was in bits. So we started off, you know, really strategic. You know, in the first few days, I'm lucky I work with a company called Torque Nutrition. They do like amazing like energy bars and gels, and that's what I use in training. And you know, their products are amazing. But see, for like a whole thing a week, you can't do a thing a week and just bars and gels. It's just not sustainable. So you have to basically incorporate all these different foods. And we basically went through basically almost every food that you could imagine that you would eat in a bike. Like we went through it that week. So like started off with energy bars and gels. Then we were on to like cakes and pastries and sandwiches and bagels. It was just like literally just anything and everything. Because it just, what would happen is I would eat something and then I'd get sick of it and then I couldn't eat it and I'd have to find something else, And by the time we got to like the final weekend, I don't know what it is about McDonald's, but McDonald's is so trusty for ultra endurance. Like McDonald's basically powered me across Australia, and McDonald's powered me across Australia and America. Like I used to get like 2 or 3 McDonald's a day when I was in Australia and America, because for one, it saves time. Like, you know, every McDonald's is the same inside, same menu, same way ordering. You know what you're getting. So when you're trying to ride 200 miles a day, it saves time. But also, McDonald's products are they're almost like bulletproof for your stomach. Like it's just so easy to eat. And so on that final weekend, I was just eating loads of like cheeseburgers on the bike and milkshakes and yeah.
Do you know
by the final day, on the Sunday, by the final day, I just couldn't even eat any food at all. And I was just drinking soup from my water bottles, chicken soup and tomato soup on the bike. And yeah, that was how we got through it.
The reason it made me laugh is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, just because I always find it kind of amusing how endurance athletes and people attempting challenges like this, you'd think because of the pain and the stress that you're putting your body through that you have to be eating like clean, high nutritional quality food, but you just can't, because you can't eat that many calories. It's just not possible. And then the other thing that I was laughing about, I worked for Deliveroo for a few years when I was into cycling, and on like a big day for Deliveroo, I do sort of 75, 80 miles around Bristol, which is quite hilly. And yeah, man, like I used to eat at McDonald's and you can literally feel your body burning through it. It's like it goes straight in and you can
Yeah.
actually feel it. You feel burning through it, and it just makes me laugh because I've done a lot of McDonald's fueled cycling myself. But yeah, you talked about the sleep deprivation. Did you
Sorry,
like?
can I just add? Sorry,
Yeah,
can I
yeah.
just add a point to that? That's actually quite amazing to hear that you would do that many miles. I've always wondered that. Actually, I've always wondered how many miles like those delivery guys do. That's you'd end up getting seriously fit if you were doing that all the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was during this period of time I described to you earlier when I was going through my salvation in the saddle and I was just cycling my way from one period of my life to another, and it seemed to make sense to get a job for Deliveroo. And it turned into something that was really great for my health, as you say. Like on a big week would easily cycle 200 to 300 miles, and we'd have a WhatsApp group with a couple hundred people in it, and people would share pictures of their Strava at the end of the day, and they'd post photos of their earnings, because obviously the more you've earned, the more you cycled. There was a guy called Nick the Leg, and we called him Nick the Leg because he used to train with semi-pro cyclists. So he cycled from Bristol to London in sort of like 5.5 hours, and that's like it's about 140 miles. So he was working for Deliveroo and he was just smashing absolutely everyone. He was doing like 7 or 8 drops an hour, and he was earning about 250 300 quid a day because this guy was just a machine. And Deliveroo started doing this nationwide advertising saying, join our Deliveroo fleet, you can earn up to £300 a day. Now, I tell you, no one else was earning anything close to £300 a day, but Nick the Leg came along and just spiked the average earnings so much that Deliveroo thought that they could like market working for Deliveroo based on his numbers. This guy that was cycling like 25 miles an hour, Bristol to London. But yeah.
That's so funny because I've actually thought about that before. I've actually always thought that if things ever, I'm quite lucky. I've got good sponsors and good partners. Sponsored by a company called Thomas Franks who look after me to be a full-time athlete. But I've always thought that if it ever went tits up and I needed to get a job or I needed to get an income again, like I'm more like a real job, I thought I could just be like a Deliveroo guy and I could actually try and do like a marketing thing with Deliveroo to say like this is who we've got working for us. He's got a world record, and like I thought that's what I would do. So it's cool to see that there's actually guys doing that.
Yeah, man. And to be fair, you could definitely probably team up with them and make like a sort of YouTube video or something. You could probably do something like that anyway, even if it's not a full-time job. Come up with some fun idea that like the Guinness World Record breaking cyclist, see how much money he can earn in a day for Deliveroo, or how many miles he can cycle in a day, and make a funny YouTube video. That could be something. That's a good idea, I reckon.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to round up the conversation, really, you spoke about sleep deprivation. Do you hallucinate, and like when you're on the bike and you haven't had much sleep, does everything go a bit crazy, and do you have like delirium and meet demons on the road or whatever? What's the experience when you get to that place mentally?
Yeah, that final weekend was crazy, man. It was like so basically what happened was I was waking up every morning at like 3:30 and then on the bike for like 4 a.m. I done that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On the Saturday morning, we didn't finish the ride from Friday until like 5 in the morning because we're chasing miles. I went to bed at like 6 a.m., was back up at 8 a.m., got on the bike for 9, and from 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, I rode from then right to the end on the Monday morning. So it was almost like 2 days nonstop, and I never went to bed again. I had some power naps in the support van along the way, but I was basically on the bike. There was like 43 hours left from getting on the bike on the Saturday to the finish on the Monday, and I was on the bike for 38 out of 43 of them. And so by like the final night, like the Sunday night, like oh, I was seeing all sorts of things. Like it was just crazy. Like the funniest thing I think was probably so like all the trees and the bushes at the side of the road were like big giant broccoli stems, and I seen two kangaroos on bikes like up ahead the road, and they were like trying to race me and stuff like that. And I remember thinking like, this is fucking nuts. Like this is not real. But I thought I knew I was hallucinating, but I was like, what's going on, man? Like it was crazy. Like I was tripping out big time.
That's hilarious. And yeah, you touched on this earlier, but how did it feel just like when you finished and you knew that you had actually achieved this goal? What was that experience like for you?
So it's quite interesting because so I set another record in 2020. I set a record for the North Coast 500, I done that in 31 hours and 19 minutes it was. So I basically rode non-stop for like 31 and a half hours.
That's 500 miles,
When I
right?
finished 517 miles, I believe it was. Yeah. And when I finished that, like the final 7 hours of that was really intense. It was like, I didn't know if I was going to get it or not. And I was really hammering at like the final 7, 8 hours from John O'Groats down to Inverness. When I arrived in Inverness City Centre and got that record, I beat it by like 4 minutes. It was so like dramatic. It was so cinematic. Like there was so many people came out to support me. That was like total like euphoria, elation. Like still to this day, the single greatest moment in my life, like for an actual moment, standalone moment. Getting the world record the following year, the Guinness World Record for the 7 day one. So it finished at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've been on the bike for like a whole week. It wasn't like pure elation. It wasn't like pure happiness. I was done. Like I'm done. Like get me off this bike. My team had to actually carry me off the bike. I couldn't even swing my leg over it. I'd been on the bike for that long. And so like getting to the finish line, I was so sleep deprived. I was so exhausted. But I was like, there was like I was definitely happy, but it was like all just like a bit much. Like I was like, what the fuck just happened? Like you think about it from like an intensity perspective, like how intense a week that is. Like just I was like a cycling machine or robot that week. Like just it was like input out, like just wake up, eat food, ride, eat food, ride. I was just like there was nothing else in my life that week except that. And so like when you get to the end of that, you're just like, I was so frazzled. I remember like after I got off the bike, I went and gave my girlfriend Megan a cuddle. Everybody came over to me. They put like a blanket around me. I was just sitting drinking like a wee hot chocolate, and I was just like, all right. Like what the fuck just happened? Like that is nuts. But it was almost like I wouldn't go as far as saying as it was an anticlimax because it was an amazing moment. But I think there was like a real the people that followed that week got really into it. And I think there was like almost like a little bit of a sadness that it was over. And I think I felt that as well. Like it'd been such a big thing in our lives, like a whole week, the community got around it, my team got around it. It was such a great week for the people at D-side and myself and my team. I think when it was over, we were all just like a wee bit sad that it was over because we kind of enjoyed, everybody enjoyed following it so much. And it was always trying to get to the end. And then we got there and we're like, oh no, can you not keep going?
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that's an experience a lot of people have when they're, and then that kind of goes back into the philosophical stuff we were talking about earlier. Like you chase goals and then you get to the goals and you're not satisfied. You don't reach your goals and then spend the rest of your life eating ice cream in your boxer shorts. You then get onto this question, which is the perfect way to end our conversation, which is what next? What's next in the book, in the movie of Josh Quigley, the cycling robot machine? Like what's coming up? What's your plans, man?
Yeah, so I've got a big dream, like a really big dream. I want to be the first Scottish winner of the Tour de France. It's an absolutely outrageous goal and dream, but it's just something that I really just truly believe that I'm capable of doing, and I just truly believe it's going back to all the spirituality chat earlier, and everything that's happened. I believe that's my purpose. That's my destiny. That's what I'm here for, and that's what I'm going to spend the next 5-10 years working towards and trying to achieve. And I'm in a great place in my life now where I've felt a lot of pressure with that dream over the years because I've taken a lot of criticism for it. Like there's a lot of people within cycling that criticize me for it, they attack me for it, and look, fair enough, I get it. I understand why not many people believe that I can do that, and they attack me for that, but I just have to be true to who I am. And, when I go to bed at night, my head hits the pillow, that's what I'm dreaming of doing. Like I'm dreaming of riding down the Champs-Elysees in yellow. Like there's never been a Scottish winner before. Like I'm a dreamer at my core, and I'm a big, driven, ambitious guy. And that's what I'm working towards. And so I might not get there, but I'm going to fucking try, and I'm going to give it my best shot. And so that's basically my plan for the future. And that's what I'm working on at the moment. I'm now just going through the process of starting racing. I'm an amazing, endurance rider. I wouldn't have got that record if I wasn't. I can go and ride 2,000 miles in a week, but I now just need to learn how to race. I need to become faster. I need to become a road racer, and that's what I'm committed to doing. I've got my first full year of racing this year, racing domestically in Scotland and in the UK, aiming towards getting signed by a professional team at the end of this year. And 2026 is like the year that I've always kind of said that I would like to do it. And so that's basically my future and my plan and my dream. And I don't really put pressure on myself anymore. I'm kind of happy in the place of trying to do it. And like just writing the story. Like, imagine just from a story perspective, you imagine just like lie down in your bed, shut your eyes, and just imagine I'd done that. It's like fucking hell. That's like the greatest story ever. It's like I've got 5-10 years to try and do that. And then if I don't do it, I don't do it. I move on with my life. It's cool. So that's it. Talking back to that thing about books and writing the story of your life, and what do you want the next chapter to be? If I'm going to write the book of my life, that's what I want it to be. And so that's what I'm committed to doing. And yeah, I'm going to give it a good shot. I've got a great team around me. I've got people that truly believe in me. I've got the physical talent to do it. I've got the mindset. I've got the ambition. I've got the sponsors, the partners, the fans, the supporters. I've got the infrastructure there, and I need to go just prove myself now as a road racer, and I can race, and I believe that I can truly do it.
Good for you, mate. I find it very inspirational. I admire your determination. I admire your self-belief, and it's an absolute pleasure to follow your journey online and to be having this conversation now. So thanks a lot for joining me. There is one thing I'll say before we go, which is that I did have a little scroll through your Instagram, actually. I did go back quite far. I was looking at some of your old videos, some of your old photos before this conversation, and one that really stood out for me was several years ago, you set off on a long bike ride. I can't remember exactly the distance you were trying to do, but you set off on a long bike ride with 2 backpacks on. And I would just want to take a moment to acknowledge how very extremely far you have come since that day when you set off on a ride with 2 backpacks on. And I just want to congratulate you on that journey. And yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, man.
Yeah, no, I'll just add a wee final thing to that. The story with the 2 backpacks is just fucking legendary. Like and that's one of the things that gives me so much hope for the future. Like if you look at, like, just to set the story for them who obviously doesn't know about it, on like my first ever cycle, I had to cycle to Carlisle from Scotland. It was like 100 miles. I'd never done more than 20, and I was going to try and do it. It was like a little test for trying to go around the world. And I didn't know about panniers at the time. I didn't know there was like bags that you could attach to your bike. So I just done it with 2 backpacks on my back, which is just fucking crazy. Like very few people actually cycle with 1 backpack, never mind 2, right? And when I look at that, it's like, when you look at that guy with the 2 backpacks is the same guy that cycled around the world, that set the Guinness World Record, and has done all the things that I've done on a bike. And so if you look at that guy 5 years ago and say he'll one day become a Guinness World Record breaker, and you see that, compare the photos of me doing that compared to then, you go, there's absolutely no chance he'll do that. What I love about that, and what just makes me so happy, is that if you look at where I'm at now, and me saying I'm going to win the Tour de France and be the first Scottish winner, it's very similar to saying there's no way he can do that. But the me of today isn't the me of 2026. So there's going to come a time in 2026 when I am that guy, and I am wearing that yellow jersey, and I am, one of the greatest athletes in the world and an absolute superstar at the highest level. And we'll look back in this me, the guy with the world record, and we're going to laugh at me. We're going to laugh at me right now. I'm going to laugh at this guy when I'm in 2026. And so that gives me so much faith and so much, further like inspiration just to keep going. And, I'm in this for the long haul, and I think I'm going to do it.
Good man. Well, I'd like to just put myself forward as being top of the media inquiry list when you do. I'm the first person to ask for the interview, mate. 4 years early, I'd love to get you booked in for that Tour de France interview if that's at all possible.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't work out, like we'll still do that interview. Do you know what I mean? This is for me, like however way it goes from here, like everything's a bonus. Do you know what I mean? Like if you take me back to, being so depressed I wanted to kill myself, and said you'd one day have a world record and you're going to be a full-time cyclist. It's like, it's crazy, man. It's like, this you know, I've made it in life, you know, just to even be who I am now and to be on the journey and to have the things that I've got in my life, you know, got a beautiful fiance, I've got an amazing flat we live together in, you know, I'm a full-time athlete, got an amazing team. Like, you know, I'm so blessed, man. And so just, yeah, there's nothing to stress about. It's all going to work out.
That's the attitude, mate. That's the attitude. All right, bro. It's been a pleasure speaking to you guys. If you want to follow Josh on Instagram and any other social media channels, I'll check in with him in a minute. I will link them all in the description below. And obviously, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Josh Quigley, you're an absolute gentleman, mate. You're an inspiration, and keep up the good work. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining me today, man.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. See you later, mate.
Cheers.